Hello and welcome to another episode of the Agency Leadership Podcast. I'm Chip Griffin.
And I'm Gini Dietrich.
And today we are going to school, Ginny.
Oh boy.
We're packing up our lunch boxes and we're walking to school only to see the doors are locked.
Right.
And we can't go in.
Get in. The teachers are not there.
Our dream when we were children that school would be closed.
Right.
Has now become
this has come to fruition.
A nightmare.
And grown-ups. Well, that stinks.
Yeah, it's not good. It's not good. I think we're all coming to the realization that here in the United States, the vast majority of students are not going to have anything that even remotely resembles a normal learning experience. And while this is not an education podcast, it does have an impact on agency businesses because agency owners have school-age children and agency employees have school-age children, and it is really disruptive.
Ooh, speaking of, bless you.
Proving the point. Proving the point.
Just as a side note, I was recording a podcast with Brad Marley, and she came over and demonstrated to everybody that he had made a snowman marshmallow with 3 big marshmallows and then tiny marshmallows all around it. And I was, so this is what happens when my child is not paid attention to. She's going to eat a snowball of marshmallows. Yes, so not being in school is going to be a challenge.
Yeah, it's a real problem, and I don't really have the answers. And I think as we go through this episode, we're going to realize there are no good answers, but it is something that anyone in a leadership role in an agency needs to be thinking about, because I was saying earlier this week that it's sort of it feels like a lot of us went into things in March thinking, okay, this is a sprint. We just, we need to get through, we need to bend the curve or whatever. And then, we can find some new normal. I think we're realizing that it's certainly not a sprint. It may not be a marathon. It may be more of an ultra marathon or a triathlon mixed with an ultra marathon, or who knows what it is, but
an Ironman or something.
It's going on and on and on.
Yeah.
And so the things that we could all sort of live with and figure out how to adjust to for 2 or 3 months becomes very different when we're talking about many more months, if not years, of some sort of a disrupted workplace. So, I think most agencies have given a lot of flexibility to employees necessarily. And I think a lot of clients have been very understanding. The question is, will that all continue? And I don't know the answer to that. I mean,
it doesn't continue, right? Because it's in the same, if you have school-age children, client, agency owner, employee, whatever happens to be, we all are in the same boat. So I imagine that people won't continue to be standing. Although I did just see that Florida State said to their employees, staff, professors, everybody, if you have to be back in school by August 15th, childcare or not. It's not okay. Because what do you do with your kids if there's no childcare, if there's no school?
Right. Well, and
you don't have a job.
Yeah. And look, there are agencies out there that are sort of taking that position with their own team members that, we're, for the summer, we're fine, but September 1st, we're coming back and we need you back in the office. And I've seen some who said, we're going to try to find ways to work with you on a flexible schedule. Some people may not be able to come back at all into the office at that point. But more importantly and more challenging, I think, is that even if you're working from home, maybe you can achieve the same level of productivity, but the time shifts, they become more significant as businesses are trying to get back to some semblance of normalcy, because you have to have meetings during the workday, right? It's, while you can do your writing at 4:00 in the morning if you need to in order to adjust to your kid's schedule, you can't do conference calls or Zoom calls at that point. There are certain things that just have to take place at specific times, and agencies, right. It becomes very difficult to adjust to. I don't have the answer.
Yeah, one of the things I've thought about, and I've talked to about too, is doing a small cohort, saying to 4 other families, all right, we're all going to be our quarantine family essentially, and which works for, because we only have one child, so there aren't other exposures for kids. Like, one of the families that I'd be comfortable doing with has a little girl who's daycare aged. And so they're saying, okay, it's great. But if she goes to daycare, well, then she's exposed to 10 or 15 or 20 families, that exposure in your house. And so all of that kind of stuff, you go, oh, maybe, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, because it would be great. I can handle 5 kids 1 day a week. I can't handle 1 kid 5 days a week.
Well, I couldn't handle any. So, my hat is off to all of the parents who have younger children. Mine are teenagers. I've got one headed off to college in the fall and one who's in high school. And
so even for your oldest, have they said what they're doing? Is there going to be in person or all online?
It'll be all online for at least the fall semester. But when he accepted there, he knew that was likely to be the case.
Sure.
He's disappointed, particularly because he was hoping to be able to leave home. So I suspect his bigger disappointment is that he has to remain in the house with us,
right? With you,
Then the courses themselves are online.
And that's such a freshman experience too.
Yeah,
Bummer.
no, I mean, I feel for kids his age and, who are at that point in their lives where they are, that they're not going to get to make that same adjustment that we all did. I mean, everybody's, having challenges of some sort, but there are certain milestones that people have that they're really missing out on. And I think that the kids transferring from high school to college are probably the ones who, get it the hardest in general.
Yep. Too. So I think that agency leader, I think the things we have to think about are what's best, of course, for the business, but also what's best for our employees. It's easy for me because I've been virtual. I've had a remote team for 9 years now. From that perspective, nothing's really changed. We're accustomed to working remotely. We have our, the ways that we work together and all that kind of stuff, and it works. And clients think it's all that kind of stuff, but adding in, now I'll be teaching 2nd grade and adding that in. I almost didn't make it.
I wonder how many people are adding this to their LinkedIn profiles, because I hear a lot of parents,
I feel like I should.
joking about this, that that they've become teachers. And actually, I do know, I know of a couple of parents who have decided to just proactively switch to homeschooling, so that instead of dealing with the confusion and the challenges of being tied, at least in some part, to your school schedule, they've said, look, we're just going to homeschool because then we can manage the schedule more effectively.
Right.
And that may be something that's worth thinking about for some parents. And it'll be interesting to see from an innovation standpoint, there are companies that help with homeschooling. Right. It'll be interesting to see, what inroads they may make in trying to help parents who just throw their arms up and say, I'd rather take this known approach than the possibility that many school districts may have, that, you start out online and then maybe you go back part-time and then you got to, it's a mess.
Well, and I think that's the biggest challenge for me personally, is if exactly to your point, we could have a routine and a schedule and it stayed the same every day, and there wasn't the possibility of we may be going back part-time in January, or we may be going back part-time now in person. We're going to have November and December. Like there's the not having an answer and not having a routine and not having a set schedule and that's what crazy the last part of this last year was. We knew that there was a 9:00 meeting every day. Okay, fine. But at like 5, the teachers would email and say, we also need to be in this meeting, this meeting, this meeting, and this meeting. And you were like, I have meetings at the same time. Like, right. You can't do that.
Right.
It's too much.
Yeah, and it's and even if it is a daily 9 a.m., what do you do when you have a client who needs you at 9 a.m.?
Yeah, well.
I mean, and there are some times where you'll be able to say to the client, no, we're going to have it at a different time. But sometimes the client, maybe it's because they're going live on CNBC at 9:15.
Fair.
Well, you can't tell them it's going to be a different time.
Yeah.
There may be a bunch of other people all involved. And so trying to find, I think one of the things from an agency perspective that you need to think about a bit are the roles for your employees. Some of those may need to adjust. So people who, have been client facing, if they have some small children, you may want to try to find ways to shift them into less client facing roles for the time being, and take advantage of their skills and their value to the agency in different ways. So I think there really needs to be some creative thinking, not just in it. It's one thing to just say for the short term, here's flexibility, we'll kind of work with you to adjust your schedule. You may now need to think about the roles and how you want to adjust them within your business to make it more manageable for everybody.
I think another challenging thing too is that the states are so different,
Yep.
In Chicago, we reopened very early. I mean, we've been open a month, and she's going to be rolling all that back. So and they expect this coming weekend to be really bad for July because we're 2 weeks out. But I think when you think that too, like all different, certainly if you have an agency, you're all based, if you're all in or you're all in Dallas, but you still are in states that have really high mortality, and there's no consistency from that perspective too. So all of those pieces come into it as well. You may have clients that are in California that can't leave their homes again, or in Chicago that can't leave their homes again, and then your agency is fine and you're going to work and all that kind of stuff. So there's all pieces that I think in March we were all sort of doing it at the same time, and now we're not. And there's a lot to come when it comes to that stuff.
Well, and particularly because, 20 or 30 years ago when, you and I were first getting into the agency business, it was most agencies worked with fairly local organizations. You might be working with a global company, but you worked with their local office from your local office. And so there was more of that synergy between the client and the agency. Now, many agencies are working with clients who are in entirely different places. So it's not just your team that may be distributed.
Yeah.
It's your client base too.
Clients, yeah.
And that increases the pressure, right? Yep. Because if you've got a client in a place that's fully open and they're operating normally, their level of understanding for the fact that you can't have everybody show up for that 9 a.m. meeting may be very different.
Yeah.
And particularly as this goes on, and I think we're seeing the frustration that people have with all of the restrictions, right? I mean, that's why we have some of the numbers that we have, because people are like, they're fed up with it. Right. And while we see that mostly on the personal side right now, and there's still, is an understanding on the business side, I do think that's going to diminish somewhat, at least. It's just a natural thing that people will start to, feel more like, okay, well, we've got to get back to our routines here as a business, and you're going to have to come with us, Mr. Agency or Ms. Agency. I don't know. I don't know
either.
And I think, and as the economic pressure ratchets up, which I think it will, we're starting to see, notices from some large companies that they're going to be laying off lots of people. The airlines sort of are at the top of that list, right? Where they're announcing, 25 to 50% cuts in their workforce.
Yeah.
That obviously has a ripple effect to other people and other industries. We're going to see more economic destruction, which means that stress levels go up, and the more stressed people feel, the less understanding they typically are of other people.
Yeah, that's fair. That's very fair. And I don't know. You said this at the beginning, and I don't know what the right answer is. It's a lot.
I think, look, as a leader, you have to continue to maintain that position of being flexible and working with your team. I do not think that there is any room for you as the employer to be taking a hard line at this point. So as difficult as it may be, you need to find ways to work with your team. You can't give them ultimatums and say, you got to show up and do this. At some point you may have to have difficult conversations and say, look, you're only able to put in 10 hours a week. That's different, right? So if you can't even put in the amount of time, let alone.
That's totally different. Yeah.
That's totally different.
That's it. Yeah.
But if they can find ways to be productive, despite their challenge, you need to try to find ways to work with them. Yeah. But I do think it requires creative thinking on both sides. And you need to have the employee and employer both trying to figure out, okay, how can I contribute to the continued success of the agency, even with all of the restrictions that I have on me? And if you have that level of flexibility, you may actually find some new ideas and new ways to work.
Yeah.
I think, and we've said this, for the last several months, there are opportunities to be had here. And it's not just opportunities at the business level. You may have opportunities to rethink how you structure your team and what roles they play and how you mix employees and contractors. And there's all sorts of things that this opens the door to, and you ought to be looking at as not just a solution to the childcare issue that we're going to continue to have, but also to improving your business.
Yeah. And I don't think that's any different from any other situation that you might have. Remember when, do you like the toes in my
for those of you who are able to watch this on video, we've got feet in the air, not Ginny's or mine.
Baby feet. There's a puppy tail.
Yeah, the small native, as she is referred to,
Speaking of flexibility,
wanted her feet to make a cameo appearance here. She is more flexible than I am. If I tried to put my feet on camera right now,
oh yeah,
that would be the end of the show. for many reasons.
Now I kind of want you to. I remember when an employee came to me and said that she was expecting and she wasn't going to come back to work. So I probed. Why? There's lots of reasons, and she said, "Well, I just think that I'll be able to work full time." I was like, "Do you want to continue working?" He said, "Yeah, I can do it full time." And I said, "What if we went to 20 hours a week?" And she went, "Oh, you would do that?" So yeah, I mean, so I think, and it's not exactly facing here, opportunity to look at different types of arrangements where you can still get the consistency and all of that, but it may not be exactly as it is right now. To your point, new ways to do things, I think, is really smart.
Yeah, and don't wait for your employee to reach their wit's end.
Right.
Try to figure out how you can broach the subject with them. And part of this comes down to continuing to have your proper one-on-one conversations with your direct reports. Your managers need to be doing that too, so that you have these opportunities and you can pick up on them before it becomes a boiling point issue for either you or the employee. So proactively bring it up. If someone has got school-age kids, sit down now and talk to them, about their plans for the fall, about how you can make adjustments to ensure that they are both productive at work and also, are coping as much as they can at home. I mean, I think at home, if you've got small children, coping probably is the only attainable goal. As I think I've said,
let me survive.
Yeah, as I think I've said before on the show, my brother, or one of them, has 3 kids under the age of 6, and he and his wife both work full time. So I honestly cannot imagine how people do that. I can't imagine how you do it with just one young child at home. I mean, I can't wrap my mind around it, to be honest.
It's not easy. I will say that it is not easy.
Yeah. So I would say if any of you listeners have really good ideas,
yeah,
we would love to hear them.
Yeah.
And I will be sure to give you a platform for sharing them, because I think that it's important that we have as many ideas as possible to try to help parents, whether they're owners or employees, find ways through this, and help each other and share ideas about how people can be as effective as possible.
Yeah. It's the whole thing. That's what my sister has done. Then she's created a small cohort of kids so that they social side of things, and they're getting together once a week. They've all said, quarantining, like you're the only people we see. So it, from that perspective. So I think there are options, but the biggest challenge right now is many districts haven't, or many districts have said, this, tell us what you're going to do instead of making the decision. And so, I don't know. And we've heard schools. I have no idea what this looks like.
Yep.
Plan that way.
Well, dear listeners, if you have ideas, do let us know. If you have that crystal ball and you can tell us what things are going to look like in 3 or 4 months, we'd love that even more. But since we have no more answers, I think we will draw this episode to a close, Ginny. So
okay.
With that, I'm Chip Griffin.
And I'm Gini Dietrich.
And it depends.
Definitely.